So thank you for coming. This is what we call a Hustings. We're going to hear from, it looks like 5 of the candidates that are running for Mitcham and Morden. It's really important as an audience. You will get a chance. I'm sure Nicola spoke to you about how they go about asking questions. But it's really important while people are speaking that we are listening, so we can all hear what people are saying. It's really, really important. I'm not going to spend too much time talking. I'm going to hand you over to Nicola. But can we give our candidates a warm welcome to Merton College? And enjoying the event.
I just want to welcome everyone to the Merton College Hustings event. And I want to thank, we have Toby Williams from the Conservative Party. We have Luke Alexander Taylor from the Democrats. We have Pippa Maslin from the Green Party. We have Des Coke from the Christian People Alliance. And we have Jeremy Maddox from the Brexit Party. So thank you very much for giving up your time. We know it's a very busy time for you to come and talk with us. This is a really important opportunity for all of you. We have students here that are may not be eligible to vote, but this is an important lesson for you to learn about democracy and about what we do. You've got to remember that although you can't vote now, the person that may be successful from these people that we have in front of us, they will still be around when you are eligible to vote, and they will have an influence on your future. So it's really important you understand what it is that they stand for and all the different aspects of what goes on in society and for you, and why maybe people have chosen the successful person to represent you. So it's a really good lesson for you to understand. Plus we have those of you that are eligible to vote, so you have a completely different reason for being here. But you also got lots of important questions that you want to ask that will have a direct impact on your life and what goes in for you, whether it's financial, career, or whether it is domestic. So one of the things that I will do for this is to make sure that everybody has an equal say on the questions that you have, and I'm trying to make sure that this remains a respectful debate. So I don't want anyone to be swearing, don't want any shouting, and I don't want people not to be intimidating or aggressive when they're feeding back. People will not agree. We have a freedom of speech, luckily, in this country, and so this means that you have to listen to what other people say, but you can also respond. So we've just had to talk about that. So what do we do if we have a question or want to respond to somebody? What are we doing? Raising your hand and we'll come to you. And we have Michael, who's around over there, and he's got a microphone, so we'll come round to you and he will take your responses to what is being said. Okay? As I've said to you before as well, we won't, although I know some of you want to aim a question at one particular party, we will not just listen from that party. Everybody will be able to respond to that question. Okay? Because it's only fair that everyone gets a chance to respond. To start off, the format we're going to have is every candidate will get 3 minutes at the beginning to tell you about themselves and why you think that you should vote for them. And then we will have a question and answer section where you've all given me questions. I'll call upon you to ask your questions. And then at the end of that process, each candidate will get 3 minutes just to do closing before we finish. Okay? And at the end of it, we are going to do our own little vote from what you've heard, so everybody gets an opportunity, no matter what, to see who you would vote for if you could vote in the election. And then we can do a little comparison and we'll let you know the result of that as well, so you can get an idea of your future. Okay, so to start with that, now we could do rock, paper, scissors to see who's going to go first, or we could just start from my end to work down. Have you got anything against that, candidates, doing it that way? Okay, so if you start from this end and work down, is that okay? Okay, if you think, can you all hear us at the back when we're talking? Yeah? Not talk quite loudly. It's quite a good room in here to talk with, but just talk quite loudly. Right, we're going to be quite close to the time, so we're going to be dead on 3 minutes.
Dead on 3 minutes?
Dead on 3 minutes and we'll be stopping.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much to Merton College for taking an active role in the democratic process by organising this event. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. By the end of this hustings, I hope that you will have a clear idea of what the Green Party stands for and what it can offer Mitcham and Morden and the UK more widely. To begin with, however, I'm acutely aware that I am a stranger before you and would therefore like to give you some idea of my background and my reasons for becoming involved in politics. So my mother's from the Philippines, my father is from England, and they met when she came here to study. When she had to return, he followed. I was born a few years later. After a bit of debate, they decided that Britain was where the best opportunities would be for all of us. So in 1977, we came over to England and we stayed with my grandparents on the Hatfield-Mead estate just over the road. That was until the council eventually managed to house us in the Figs Marsh ward, so kind of Tooting way, Mitcham Tooting way. Studying philosophy and English at university, I went on to become a secondary school English teacher, state secondary school, and that brought the privilege of talking and thinking about language and literature, and working with and teaching many wonderful people. But the job changed. Exam results began to be emphasised over everything else. I couldn't bear to be complicit with it. So after 13 years, I decided to go back to university, did a Master's in Film and Television Studies, did a PhD on British coming-of-age films, whilst also doing some part-time undergrad tutoring in media arts. So in that latter period, the coalition unleashed austerity upon our public services, and I became angry. From the NHS to our schools, from the welfare system to the criminal justice system, I saw how cuts were beginning to destroy the very fabric of our society. I began to support campaigns to fight back. And when my father's health took a turn for the worse, it became distinctly personal. Problems with his healthcare created delays and difficulties, and I learned how difficult it is to be a carer. I decided to become a caseworker with a local deaf and disabled people's charity called Merton Centre for Independent Living. And through that work, I tried to effect a positive change on people's lives in our community. At the same time, climate breakdown, the depletion of species, and the huge amount of waste that humans fail to deal with responsibly have become overwhelming concerns. I feel that it is our moral duty to take action for the sake of your generation more than mine. So, in conclusion, it's all of this that's brought me to the Green Party. As I hope my answers in this hustings will reveal, we will overcome environmental and social justice. And I hope...
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It is reassuring that all this disenfranchisement and the fact that people don't care about politics anymore doesn't seem to be the case in here. So first of all, thank you for coming along, and thank you for the college for organising this. So I'd like to do three things. First of all, tell you a bit about myself, tell you about some policies that the Liberal Democrats are standing on in this election that I think I'm particularly proud of and I'd like to see it happen. And then at the end, I'm going to say the B word to talk a little bit about being. And that's Brexit, by the way. So, first of all, my name's Luke. I grew up out in the countryside. I moved down to London for university, where I did engineering in London. So I spent 4 years doing that. I then moved to Vauxhall, South London, working in central London at a big engineering consultancy where I manage projects. I do analysis of data and work out kind of how to deliver projects, aviation projects, transport projects, that sort of stuff. I moved to Clapham in 2015, where I stood in general election in Battersea. So I did that where I lived there. I've spent a little bit of time moving overseas. I've been to Toronto, I've been to Auckland, so I've moved around a bit. But now I'm back in London, now I'm back in Mitcham and Morden. So I've lived here for 4 years, almost as far in the other direction as you can possibly get before you run into Tooting. So my centre of gravity is much further that way, but it's been fantastic. Whilst we've been campaigning this election, coming around and seeing this half of the constituency, Morden and this area in general. So that's a little bit about myself. 3 policies, or a couple more policies I think the Liberal Democrats can offer you and offer people like us to help us out. So the first one, the big key one, is offering free childcare for all working parents from when your child is 9 months old to 2 years old. That means that you will be able to go back to work if you want to, and we should be able to afford high quality childcare to support you, and not having to rely on parents, not having to rely on other support to look after your kids. So it gives you the flexibility to go back to work if you want to. Another one is changing careers after school. So obviously all of you guys are here, training, learning, gaining skills. What we're going to do is provide £10,000 for every person to use to pay for training after they've left school. So you'll be able to use that to go to education colleges like this, on specific training courses, to learn new skills if you want to change jobs. That is incredibly powerful because jobs are changing, the economy's changing, and the workforce needs are changing. So you'll have the ability to upskill and to change later in your life if you need to. And the final one is about mental health services, funding mental health services. That's been really undercut over the last few years of funding cuts. I think that's vital that we fund that. And Brexit's bad. That's not from me.
Well, ladies and gents, thank you very much indeed for coming along today. It's great to see so many of you here. Thank you so much for inviting me along. Rather than talk about the big national issues at this stage, I want to start off by telling you a bit about myself and what I want to achieve if I'm elected as your Member of Parliament. So my name is Toby Williams. I'm the Conservative candidate. I live just down the road in Tooting with my fiancée Hannah. I work at the Greater London Authority over in London Bridge, and I'm primary school governor in South London, a job that I absolutely love. And I think Mitcham and Morden is a fantastic place to work and live, but I want it to be even better. And I've got 5 priorities in order to deliver for local people. First of all, we need to get to grips with crime in Merton. It is simply not acceptable. The crime has gone up by 43%, knife crime, I would say, up by 43% in the last 3 or 4 years. We need to get more cops on our streets, and I will be fighting for Mitcham and Morden to get its fair share of any additional police officers. I want more funding for our education and schools. I will be campaigning for an increase in per pupil funding for every single primary and secondary school in the constituency, and I will also be securing millions of investment for St Helier Hospital, because that hospital is so important. On transport, our borough, our constituency simply isn't as well connected as other parts of London. I want to change that. I would protect our bus services, our tram services, our train services, and I would campaign relentlessly for the upgrade to the Northern Line that we were promised years ago but was never delivered. Fourthly, our borough, frankly, is a mess. Labour-run Merton Council simply has failed to keep our streets clean. I want to help the Labour-run Merton Council to turn that around, because that is what comes up time and time again on the doorstep, I promise you. And finally, before we can do anything, we need to resolve the big political issue, and that is Brexit, and it's only a majority Conservative government that can do that. So thank you for coming along, thank you for listening, and I really look forward to the discussion going forward.
Hi everyone, my name is Des Coke. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm here because I want to stand as a representative for Mitcham and Morden, and I'd love to be elected to stand in that way. I didn't always come from Mitcham and Morden. I came from London Borough of Brent. I was born in Brent. I spent the first 40 years of my life in Brent. Then I spent another 10 years in Hammersmith, and then I spent time, for the last 12 years I've been here, so I've told you my age already, yeah? The key thing is, yeah, I like colleges and universities, and we want to support colleges and universities if we are elected to power. Why? Not only because my wife comes here, number one, but because I believe the future for the next generation is in education. Yeah? And yes, we want to provide for colleges, universities. On the issue of crime, we believe the reason why there's so much crime in this borough, and I can tell you from other boroughs, and my experiences in other boroughs, Brent and Hammersmith and Fulham, yeah, is because there's limited opportunities for young people to do. So basically, you've got 6-week holidays, you go after school, and you've got very little places for them to go. So obviously, they get bored, they get frustrated. The computer alone is not enough. Yeah, having a computer at home is not enough. So hence, you've got an increase in crime. What we want to do, even for ex-offenders, if they do get released, when they do get released, we want to support ex-offenders. Because we know that crime costs each person 30,000 per annum. Yeah? So we actually want to, it costs us, the taxpayer, 30,000 per annum. So we want to be able to support the ex-offender when they leave prisons, so that they'll be able to be more helpful in their society. We stand really for marriage, one of our main policies. And marriage, if you were to get married as God intends, which means a Christian marriage, we will give £12,000 to that marriage, as long as you attend 5 counselling sessions for marriage. When you get your first child, we will give £6,000 for marriage. Yes, that's 18,000 when you get that, yeah? Because as long as you attend 5 counselling sessions. We believe in the building of our society. We believe also in that carbon, that what's happening with the greenery. We call it greening in the manifesto, which is very much the climate change. We believe it's important to focus on the next generation again, so that we want to put things in place. We were saying no to plastic bags. We want compostable plastic bags, the ones that, not the ones that are selling. We want to be able to have bags that disintegrate, basically, is what I'm saying. Is that another?
Yeah.
Really sorry. There's 5 policies. Sorry about that. Here I am. I want to do the best for this community because I live in for the last 1 year.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremy Maddox from the Brexit Party. And the first thing I'd like to say is it's really great to see an almost packed audience of young people wanting to get involved in politics. I myself got involved in politics at a very early age, and I was privileged to be able to do some things to go out there and push politics and democracy to other nations which were just emerging out of totalitarian states. So I went off to places like Poland and Russia and Hungary to talk about politics and help explain to people how to get involved in democracy. It's a real privilege, actually, being able to have democracy. A large part of the world doesn't have that, so it's great that you guys are involved right now. I then went on to work in Africa, also promoting democracy and setting up an African Young Democrat Union. I had the great honour and privilege of meeting Nelson Mandela and being there for the previous World Cup for rugby. And recently I've got involved again in Africa in trying to save the rhino. I don't know if many people are aware, but in every 8 hours, on average, a rhino is shot and killed by poachers, which is an appalling statistic, and within a few years it could be made extinct by poaching. So that's something that's very close to my heart. So that's a bit about me. I live in southwest London, and I represent the Brexit Party, and it does what it says on the tin. We want Brexit to happen as soon as possible. We've had 3.5 years of trying to get Brexit done, and the politicians, unfortunately, most of them, never actually believed in it, and they've done everything they possibly could to stop it happening. So this has created all of the difficulties that we're experiencing today, because without politicians and without leadership in the country, nothing is going to get happen. So why is it that we believe in Brexit? Well, the main argument for Brexit is that we take back control over our own regulations and laws. This allows us to do what we want to do, rather than being told by a virtually unelected European Union of officials. How many people here know who their member of the European Parliament is? 1, 2, three? 3 people. Anybody else? I would hope that all the people on this table know who their European Parliament member is, but you see, that's the difference. Whereas I'm sure most of you know who your member of Parliament is. Sadly not here, but I'm sure you know. And this is the difference, and this is why the European Parliament and the European Union is totally unaccountable. We want to change that. We want to get it done, and we want to get it done now with a clean break so we can move on with politics and help everybody in society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Almost stayed to time. Very impressed. Although I think the prize goes to Toby because you're under time, so well done. Right, so we're going to start asking some questions now. And this is your chance for you to do your grilling of some of the things that you've heard, because some of the topics that are mentioned are coming up in the questions. There's some big questions that are coming up here. So, let's start with Emma from Travel and Tourism.
Poverty is rising, especially homelessness. As it has risen, what are you going to do to stop it?
Do you want to aim that with the particular one first?
Thank you.
Shall we start from this end downwards as we started first? Shall we start with Jeremy first?
We didn't hear the question.
So property prices are rising, and homelessness is an issue, and what are you going to do about homeless? You hear that?
Yeah, that's a basic question.
Was that a good summary? Excellent. So, in the Brexit Party, we believe that we need more homes for young people. Actually, we need more homes, full stop. There are just not enough homes in the country. And it's a particular problem in urban spaces and places like Mitcham and Morden because you can't actually build anymore unless you build upwards, because the concentration and density of housing makes it very difficult, and it's very difficult to house people unless you build upwards or unless you build on greenbelt land or build in the parks, which not everybody wants. So it is a huge problem. But there are also council estates, and I've been touring around in the last few weeks and been to a lot of the estates in Mitcham and Morden, and frankly, it's absolutely disgusting. I'm sure that most of you live in nice properties, but some of the estates are really appalling. And I am absolutely shocked by what I've seen from this council and the way that they've maintained some of the estates. There are rats running everywhere, there is rubbish that's not collected, there's a 2-weekly bin collection. 2 weeks in the middle of London, I think, is way too much. And it needs to be brought down to weekly collections, so that there is existing property which needs to be looked after and needs to be properly maintained. And believe me, if I was elected Member of Parliament, I would do something about that, and I would be cracking down and asking that council what's going on. And in addition, we need to sort out the building of some of the projects which seem to have been part privatised in this constituency, and actually make sure that the housing that's provided is affordable and for local people.
For the homeless, we are basically saying that nobody should go hungry. First and foremost, what we will be doing is we will be giving to the homeless free night shelter. It's in our manifesto, if you look it up, yeah? Free night shelter, where there'll be free food as well. That's our intention, yeah, for the homeless. Also, what we'll be doing is we will be building, we'll be looking at places where we can build affordable housing for the homeless person. Because we don't believe anybody in London in this day and age should be really homeless. So that's our intention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, Emma. You're right to raise it. I think what's being talked about already is absolutely right. We frankly just need to build more homes. We are not building enough homes for people in this country. I'm pleased that in the Conservative Manifesto we have a target to build another 1 million homes in the next 5 years, and there are ways that we need to do that. We need to sort out the planning system and simplify it even more. For example, in London, there are literally acres of derelict industrial land which are protected. You can't build anything on them. They're completely derelict, but you can't do anything with them. That's madness. That's absolute madness. We need to be freeing up that sort of land and building homes on that sort of land. Building on public land as well has been woefully inadequate. For example, building on TfL land over the last 3 or 4 years has been far, far too slow. We need to think about what sort of homes we're building as well. Does anyone know how many homes the GLA, Greater London Authority, in coordination with Merton Council, built last year? How many family-size homes? 0. They built 0. That is wrong. We need to be able to house families in this part of London. The cost of housing is obviously far too high. Building more homes will help that, absolutely, but we need to look at other ways that we can help people to get onto the housing ladder. We have said in our manifesto that we are going to be looking at increasing stamp duty, so the tax you pay on buying a home for people from overseas, which will help to bring prices down. And also, and I think this is really important, especially in London, give discounts for new build homes for young people from the area. Because in somewhere like Mitcham and Morden, where property prices are high, it is really hard for people like you coming out of college or coming out of university and your first job actually being able to get a deposit together and buy a home. And so you have to go elsewhere. That's wrong. I want you to be able to stay in this constituency, and having a discount will help you to be able to do that.
Again, thanks for the question. So I think you referenced poverty as well, and homelessness. People end up homeless for a number of reasons. It may well be access to mental health services, that they don't have the support to live independently, to have access to the support that the state can give and that the health service can give. If you have problems with addiction, or if you have problems that mean you can't live in rental homes, or you've had to move out from your family. So investing in mental health services is incredibly important to make sure that people who end up on the street with those circumstances have the support they need. Absolutely. Building houses to give us somewhere to live is important, so that there are enough houses to live in. In our manifesto, we've got a target of 300,000 homes a year, 100,000 of which are social housing, so that they can be allocated by councils to people who are vulnerable and need access to those. One of the ways that we will fund that is by increasing council tax on second homes. So if the wealthy who have second houses out in the countryside or in different parts of the country, they'll be paying a higher contribution to allow councils to fund that house building, to provide homes for people to actually live in, rather than just use as a bulk hole for the weekend. I think the general approach to house building has not been aggressive enough. It has not been requiring private landlords and landowners to build houses. And I think the government has to do a better job of doing that, and working with local councils. As a non-Labour MP, we will be able to hold the Labour Council to account, because ultimately we have a single-party state in Mitcham and Morden at all levels, all the way through to the mayor, and that isn't working. They're not being held to account at any point. So I think for all of us would argue that somebody other than a Labour MP here would be beneficial to people in Mitcham and Morden.
Thanks for the question. Homelessness is something that I have noticed a massive increase in recent years. That's partly why I said in my introduction that I became angry about austerity. Now, others have quite rightly talked about the need to build more housing, and in particular social housing. Successive governments have depleted our social housing stock. Some statistics are that in the early 80s there was about 7 million social homes available, and then in 2014 it was under 5 million, despite a population increase. Now, at the same time, private rent was going up, so it's a complicated picture. However, I don't think that it's just about building more homes. I think that we really need to address why people are being pushed into homelessness in the first place. And Luke's quite right, mental health issues and a lack of available, immediate treatment is a part of that. But what I see through my work at Merton Centre for Independent Living is I see the effects of so-called welfare reforms, i.e. the changes that the government, and indeed the coalition, were placing upon the benefit system. And really, the reforms are deeply unfair in many, many ways. The introduction of universal credit, for example, which combines 6 benefits into one, has been a very messy rollout. It still isn't entirely rolled out. And the particular relevance of that benefit to the housing issue and the homelessness issue specifically is that the universal credit is about paying people 5 weeks in arrears. Okay, so you don't get the money up front, you have 5 weeks before you get your first payment. And then it goes on and on. And the idea behind this is to mimic work, because when we go to work, the first day we turn up, we don't get a wage, we have to wait for probably a month. However, that 5 weeks, a lot can happen, and a lot of money is needed to live for 5 weeks. And if you don't have anything, you lose potentially the roof over your head, or you have to make really difficult choices as to whether you will have your heating on, whether you will eat, etc., etc. I don't need to take you through all of the ramifications. But essentially, it's that, for me and the Green Party, it's the welfare reforms that are responsible for pushing more and more people into homelessness. I could say more, but I think I'm going to stop.
A response that wants to do before we move on to the next bit. Emma, as your question, do you have any responses that you have to any of the candidates?
I just think that the mental health is the main issue where there's a lot of homeless.
So mental health is an issue. So is there anything related to mental health that you wanted to have an extra?
They should have put more money into it. A lot of people don't get help about it.
Absolutely. I think the waiting times for mental health, because that's not been included in the waiting time targets up to now, that is a really dangerous oversight, and everybody has a right to be treated for all the things, whether it's physical or whether it's mental, and I think that's what about. I think that a lot of us would agree that those bringing those targets in to ensure that is focused on is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Can I just ask it? I'll say this really loudly for people who are at the back. So I'm asking Emma basically, I'd like to know a little bit more about what she sees as the journey from having mental health issues to homelessness. What's the connection? Can you spell it out?
No? Basically, I think it's that when people have mental health issues, they feel like they can't seek help from other people, so that they might leave their families and they become homeless or run away and stuff like that. I've seen it happen before. That's why it's a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So it's isolation from your loved ones because they don't necessarily understand. It's hard to be with them, but you want your independence. You can't maintain that existence, and then they don't have the money. So yeah. Thank you. That's great.
Right, we're going to move on to another. We've got quite a lot of different things, and there's a big problem, so we're going to start on that one. So if I can go to Richard for access to nursing. Richard, do you mind talking? Talk loudly, we've got some people back as well.
I want to know what the government is doing to support more people to become qualified nurses, and how will your government also solve the constant shortage of staff within the NHS?
Have you got a particular person you want to start with, or should I just pick someone? There we go.
So I think this is the first point which we can say the B word. So Brexit is affecting our ability to retain staff in the NHS. Hundreds of EU residents are going home. They're leaving the country because of the atmosphere, because of their ability to pay the nurse tax that the Conservative manifesto will bring in. I think it's £625 a year for a nurse to register to work here. I think that government support and nursing bursaries have been cut. Obviously that's affecting people's abilities to study to become to enter nursing. One of the things in the Liberal Democrat manifesto is to bring back nursing bursaries for specific areas. I think it's areas of nursing that have acute shortages. I couldn't give you any more detail on how they define that or how that's decided, but I think it's one thing, absolutely giving people support to go into jobs that we need that staff, we need connections with local communities is absolutely vital, and I do support that. But in general, the problem with the NHS is funding. We will all say that the NHS needs more funding. The NHS needs a lot of things, but funding ultimately is step one. And the questions about whether St Helier Hospital retains all its services, all this sort of stuff is related to that overall size of the pie. The pie needs to be bigger and the pie needs to be bigger. And I think that the Liberal Democrat Manifesto commits a similar amount to the Conservative and Labour manifestos, but it also focuses, I think, as we mentioned previously, on provisions for mental health, which ultimately affects so much of our society, both through making other needs more complex, but also homelessness and addiction and crime as well. So I think all that together is how we respond to the NHS funding and staffing, as you mentioned, but also then the specific support for the nursing bursaries that I think is really the nub of the question.
I'd like to respond because my friend mentions the B word. When it comes to the B word, the first question was about the resources that we have in the country in order to deal with the homelessness problem. And at the moment, we have an open borders system for the European Union. So anybody can come here from other members of the European Union, irrespective of skills or ability or anything, and after a short time they can claim housing and benefits and other things in the country. Now, I have no wish whatsoever to blame people for doing that or say that they are wrong. But we are a country which has limited resources. And there's a certain unfairness, I think you would agree, where we are entitling some people from Western European countries to come here with no qualifications or anything at all, and yet the nurses and doctors that we might want from Commonwealth countries, from places where they would want to come to this country, in Africa, the United States, Australia, or China, or wherever, to staff our NHS, they can't come because we don't have the resources, because those resources are already used up. Now, we believe in the Brexit Party in impartiality, so that we're treating everybody equally across the entire world, so that when we need nurses and doctors, and maybe computer scientists or physicists or other people who come from everywhere, not just the European Union, then we can bring them in. But particularly, in answer to your question, if we need nurses, we can bring them in. But the second part of the answer, and this is something really important that the Brexit Party believes in, and that is that we don't train enough people locally. Actually, we don't. I know, I've got friends of my kids who are just at university now. Some of them would love to be doctors. They could be doctors. In any other country, they have all the qualifications to be doctors. Others of them would like to be nurses. They could be nurses and they have the qualifications. But the places are not available. And that's what we need to change. We need to make sure there are more places to train local doctors, local nurses, and that way we can staff the NHS. Thank you very much.
Richard, thank you for that question. It's a very important question. Yes, we absolutely need more funding for the NHS, and that includes more nurses. What we plan to do, if we're able to form a majority in a few days' time, is to put an extra 34 billion quid into the NHS, and that will go towards ensuring that we have 50,000 more nurses in the NHS. Now, some of those will be new nurses, and those nurses will be able to come in as a result of changes to training and bringing back the nursing bursary, which frankly should never have gone anywhere in the first place. That was a bad decision. And we also need desperately to look at retention, because if we are going to get more nurses in the NHS, we need to make sure that nursing is a profession that people want to stay in. So we need to look at work-life balance. We need to look at conditions at work and things like that. The B word has been brought up already, obviously, and what I would say, when this country does leave the EU, if there is a Conservative government, we will have a fast-track visa system for NHS professionals so they can come to this country quickly and easily and start carrying out the amazing work that they do.
I have to say, before I talk about any green ideas for nursing, I'm amazed that you should say that you need to fund the NHS more and getting rid of the bursary was a bad idea. Of course, I'm delighted to hear that you want to bring the bursary back and want to fund the NHS further, but it kind of seems like the current government want to give with one hand and take away with the other, not just with nursing. So, with the bursary, the Green Party would unequivocally bring it back. In England alone, we've got 40,000 missing nurses, as it were. We would dedicate $1 billion a year to bringing back that nursing bursary. We also would, I've been talking about recruitment and retention. With recruitment, I think that there needs to be more in schools, so before people get to college level, actually encouraging people into the profession. When I was teaching, as I said earlier, in state schools, I was amazed that we didn't have more people coming in from the professions like nursing, fire services, policing, etc., to talk and to try to inspire people, actually. So I would like to see some really, some recruitment drives happening within schools. In terms of retention, then, of the people who become the nurses eventually, and let's remember it's going to take time now to train up people. We're not going to magically be getting the 50,000 nurses that the current government is talking about promising. However, if the NHS can be funded properly, and we can stop with this idea of ridiculous efficiency savings, which actually just cuts under another name, then we could, I believe, afford to pay nurses a bit more so that they could have a slightly more comfortable lifestyle. It's an incredible profession, nursing. The selflessness that it takes, the trauma that you are dealing with all of the time, takes amazing resilience. And so, yes, if you had more Greens elected, we would definitely be effecting changes on the system which would value our nurses an awful lot more. And hopefully off the back of that, you'll get more and people going into what I believe to be a wonderful profession.
Thanks for the question. Excellent question. I just want to say, for me, nurses do hard work, really hard work. I've seen it. Basically, I was working as an ambulance crew was it April? I finished work in April. And I've seen the work within the wards, and basically our job was to take people up to hospital appointments and then drop them back home. And some of the people that were coming, that we was picking up, they were actually going home to die, because they're actually on the last port of call. And all the time we used to meet nurses and their work, the workload, the work-life balance is very hectic. It's like they spend a lot of time caring about people. And we want to give more to nurses, for the hard work that they do. How we would want to recruit more nurses. And I think where the main problem is that I think more can be done within primary schools and secondary schools in terms of getting young people ready for their career progression, so that when they leave primary and secondary, they have more of an understanding of what they could be. And I think a lot more could be done at that level, so that people can they have more of an understanding of where they want to go in life. So for me, I think, rather than the teaching of things like gender identity, that could be done more, because there's more in terms of where they could be in terms of earning potential, in terms of caring for society. So I'm saying, as a Christian People's Alliance, we want to give more to the NHS. We want to encourage nurses and reward them for the work they're doing. Thank you.
We've got quite a few questions, so I'm going to limit it to a couple of minutes just so we can keep it going. Is that okay? But following on from those questions, I'm going to ask Effa. Effa?
Yeah.
Can you ask a question?
It's a follow-up, more or less like a follow-up question. Just I was going to ask about the nursing shortage, but my colleague just mentioned it. So my question is, you all talked about recruiting and taking on more staff, to deal with the situation. But my question is, where is the money coming from to deal with the shortage to deal with the shortage, and then is there any proposed redundancy or restriction in place? That's my question.
So I think we will perhaps take it first this time.
So the money, the multi-billion-pound investment that we want to put into the NHS comes off the back of a growing economy and money coming in that we are able then to invest into the NHS. I don't think anyone would be laid off at all, if that was your question. I think that we would be having additional nurses in the NHS, not fewer.
Anyone else like to respond to that question?
Very straightforward from me. The Democrats are quite clear that we think that we can afford to pay a small amount of extra tax to pay for the NHS and pay for the investments in our healthcare. We've said we'll put a penny on income tax, so that's a percent increase on income tax to pay for those investments. But similarly, if we are able to stop Brexit, whether it's tomorrow or next Thursday, or whether it's in a second referendum, then the economy will grow quicker. There will be more money for the government to spend. We'll be able to use that money to invest in not just the NHS and healthcare, but everything else as well.
Two questions, you can probably answer both at the same time.
Okay.
So, because it's one of kind of, we'll go with you and then the others can answer it as well. So, can I come to you after this one? Yeah, do yours? Yeah, it's about funding.
Yeah, okay, so with the funding, essentially we would like to raise corporation tax. We would like corporations to be paid what we see as a fairer share, and that can go towards the bursary, for example. We also, it might sound completely unrelated, but we don't see it as this. Environmentalism is at the heart of what we do, and as I hope will come up later, although it may not, we want to decarbonise the economy, and involved in that, integral to that, is a carbon tax, which is for imported fossil fuels and domestic extraction. And basically, through the carbon tax, we will be able to fund other aspects of our economy, such as the NHS.
All I'm saying is basically what we're looking at is tax should be fair. Tax is not fair at the moment. At the moment, you've got people like Google, Amazon, who's paying absolutely nothing because what they do, they pay tax abroad. Yeah. So you've got the person that's working. Basically, people are working. We all pay tax. We'll always pay tax. But you've got other people that are paying nothing. And I'm saying our money will come from those people who are taking their money abroad, Google, Amazon, and the likes of that, and we'll get the money from there to put more money into NHS, and I'm sure we'll get millions from those companies. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question to go start with you straight afterwards. So if you do want to respond first, and then the next question will come straight to you afterwards.
Okay.
So do you want to respond to this?
Okay, right. Yes, well, I thought I'd just respond. I mean, I'm sure you know, myself and my Liberal Democrat colleague are on opposite ends of the spectrum, yeah?
Yes.
So they believe that there's some kind of a Brexit dividend if we actually don't do Brexit. And this is based on the fact that the economy will not decline as much as they think it will do, according to certain predictions. The people who've made these predictions have based it on us doing Brexit and then doing absolutely nothing else. Nothing. So we do Brexit and we don't do any changes in our regulations. We do no trade deals. We have no dividend from and benefit from doing Brexit at all because we just stay still. And that is where the Brexit dividend comes from as they see it. Now I can ask, does anybody know how much we spend every month at the moment on staying in the European Union?
billion.
It is exactly right, lady in the front. So it's about £1 billion a month, and we've been in the EU since we voted to leave for 3.5 years. So roughly, any mathematicians, how much is that? It's over 40 billion that we've already spent. Now, not the 39 billion that we're about to spend by giving it to the European Union, 40 billion that we've already spent. So add that to the 39 billion, add that to the 7 billion that we're leaving in the European Investment Bank, and add that to the 400 billion that is contingent liabilities. That's an awful lot of money. The dividend here is when we get Brexit done. That's the dividend. The dividend is the money that we don't give the European Union, that we keep, and 39 billion, believe me, is an awful lot of money to build hospitals and to invest in our NHS and services. Thank you.
The next question has a bit of the NHS but also has a B word in it, which is why I moved the subject on. So if I can go to Lamin.
There's been talk of a trade deal with the US after Brexit, so how will this affect the NHS?
Say that again?
There's been talk of a trade deal with the US. How will this affect the NHS? There's been talk of a trade deal.
Yeah, no, I got the question. I was just thinking of my reply. No, I know the reply. So it goes back. It's the same things that I've actually been saying. And the most important thing about Brexit is that we take back control of our own regulations. Now, I know why you're asking this question, because Donald Trump is about to come over and visit. He's not here yet. He's here. Okay. So Donald Trump, he's the guy who's doing, and there was a leak from the Labour Party who leaked some papers claiming that they'd found this incredible evidence that there was a secret deal to sell off the NHS to the United States. It turned out that this was complete and total bogus. There was no smoking gun. There was never any plan. There were some discussions, and it turns out that so far, Donald Trump has been told that the NHS is not for sale, and he's even agreed that it's not for sale and he doesn't intend to buy it. And even if he wanted to, and even if there was some plot by somebody somewhere in the government, the fact is, taking back control of our regulations means we get to decide. Now, that is not the case in the European Union. If the European Union go ahead with a TTIP plan, which was what was planned before we were going to leave, before Brexit, that would, sir, have included us signing away and privatising potentially parts of the NHS. It's by getting out that we can control our NHS and make sure that it stays under our control and it stays as the NHS, which we're all very proud of. Thank you.
So, on a couple of specific points, TTIP actually specifically excluded the NHS because, as part of the EU, we were able to say, no, we want that opt-out, and we gained that.
We haven't done TTIP, so it hasn't excluded.
When it was being negotiated, that was specifically excluded. Trade deals work by giving somebody something they want and you getting something in reply. Now, after Brexit, we're going to have to go and do all these brand new trade deals around the world and give countries things that they want to get things that we want. Now, when we're in the common market in the EU, we're all clubbing together and we're all kind of cooperating because they're close by. We've got benefits of manufacturing, of common standards on items and objects. That's why that was a good idea. The proposal to have trade deals with the countries around the world, like the US, is that they can have access to other things. Now, the US will want access to providing healthcare services. I think the suggestion they're going to buy our NHS is bogus, and it's used to scaremonger by the Labour Party usually. What they'll actually do is allow American healthcare companies to run parts of it, like we do today. Like lots of private companies provide services within the NHS. And we can disagree on to what extent that is right, but the reality is the US will want their companies to be able to do that because it's very lucrative. Now, we think, some of us think that that is a bad idea because they'll be extracting profit from our NHS. Now, we can manage companies that are based here a lot better. We can keep control over how they do that and the regulations. Similarly with food standards that would be part of the US trade deal. We currently have very high food quality standards, and things like chlorinated chicken, which is chlorine washed after it is slaughtered, because the quality of hygiene in US slaughterhouses is so much lower than here. They have to be chlorine washed to clean all the shit off. And that's why chlorine washed chicken is a problem, because American slaughterhouses are dirty. Now, that's part of the thing they want. They want access to our market to sell their goods. And that's what we'll be negotiating, and that's why we will be in a weak position to stop that.
Okay, thank you. Good question. So, how will it affect the NHS? The simple answer is that our NHS is not for sale, and it won't be for sale under a majority Conservative government. It is as simple as that. In terms of the document that came out the other day, absolutely, you're completely right. There was no smoking gun whatsoever. In fact, the document pretty much ruled out the US being able to buy our NHS. So actually, it proved completely the opposite of what the Labour Party intended it to prove. In terms of TTIP, yes, if we're part of the EU, we obviously have less control over the trade deals that the EU signs, because we are one of 28 member states. So if TTIP was signed, we would have had less control over that particular agreement. Outside of the EU, we will be able to make our own agreement with the US, and that will be able to benefit us as a country. But one thing I can guarantee you is the NHS will not be for sale.
Okay, so I don't need to say too much about a trade deal with the US and the NHS, because it's not going to happen under the Green Party. What I'd actually like to focus on, rather than repeating the points that have been made, but just in different ways, is point out the fact that we have a government, we have a representative here who says that the NHS is not for sale. But the Health and Social Care Act of 2012 opened up our NHS to private companies on an unprecedented scale. So 10% of the NHS England budget now is spent on care provided by non-NHS bodies. And if you look at the number of contracts that have been going to private companies over the years, we've had a jump from 2.8% in 2006 to 2007 to 7.7% in 2016 to 2017. So basically, the two guys sat next to me, their parties, under the coalition in 2012, introduced strictly speaking, they didn't introduce privatisation in the NHS. It was really New Labour before, and if we want to be strictly speaking, John Major before that. There was something called private finance initiatives, which is basically building hospitals under private ownership and leasing them back at extortionate rates. So like payday loans for hospital building is the way to think of it. But the Green Party, if anybody here is really anxious about whether we might start having American companies, or more American companies, I should say, running our NHS services, we are the only party who want to take things back into public ownership again, wholly publicly funded and run and accountable. Because whilst we still have this burgeoning privatisation, and it's through the back door, the NHS still lies open. It's still vulnerable to not just the US, but other countries who might be unsuitable. The final thing I'll say on it is that if you look at the US healthcare system, it's a dreadful system. It's an insurance-based system. It's not like ours. It doesn't have the principles of universal healthcare for all, free at the point of use. There's no equity there. There are millions of people who don't have access to healthcare, who are having to choose between selling their house or having a life-saving operation, for example. I would just recommend, and then I will be quiet, a Michael Moore's documentary, Sicko, I think it's 2008, it's quite a while ago, but it's still really relevant. So if you want to know about the US healthcare system and how we don't want to go down that route, have a look at that one.
All I want to say is, basically, regarding the B word, Christian People's Alliance, where we're coming from is that Britain needs Christian values. The country voted 3 years ago to leave, and we should honour the democracy of the country and leave. Yeah? They voted to leave. Did they not? Okay. Anyway, we voted to leave, we should leave. That's ethics. That's Christian values. Yeah? People want to leave, we should leave. Okay. Number 2, we ain't going to sell the NHS. We're late into selling the NHS. We want to promote people in this country to get more, especially people that need social care and people that need GPs and people that need doctors and nurses. We want to help. That's where we're coming from. Thank you.
Well, one final question that we want to get into, more relevant to these guys at the moment, and that's from Hannah in Forensic Science Group. Could we just have a minute just to respond to them and do our final closing?
Yeah, so uni fees are quite high. What do you plan to do about uni fees? Do you plan to lower them or abolish them, or?
So what's the plan on tuition fees is what was going to? So please start with Pippa this time.
Okay, so basically we would abolish tuition fees. When I went to university the first time round, 94 to 97, I got in just before tuition fees were introduced. And that, I wasn't rich as a student, certainly, but what I have seen from my own personal experience, as I said in the introduction, I've been a visiting tutor at university whilst I was doing my PhD. The students that I was teaching are caught between trying to have enough money to pay their rent, pay for their food, etc., buy whatever they need for their studies, and actually attending the courses, doing the work. So I was really, really shocked when I was sort of teaching in the last few years at Royal Holloway University specifically in the media arts. Okay, sorry. There were people who were asking me, could I miss the last half hour? Could I miss this session because I need to go to my job in Sainsbury's? And it's that kind of thing, that situation that's being created by tuition fees. And anyway, the final thing I'll say is that tuition fees have created this market within universities. Students are starting to behave like customers and not really thinking about education for education's sake. And that is something that's really upsetting, and I could talk a lot about, and will do later if you want me to.
Yes, so the reality of tuition fees is, I'm sure that all of you are very interested to hear what the Liberal Democrats are going to say about tuition fees. So, obviously, in 2010, we promised we'd abolish tuition fees, and then we voted with the Conservatives to increase it. We weren't the leading party of government. We had to vote on things that we didn't like to get other things that we did. That's the reality of coalition. Now, tuition fees, the solution that we've come up with, is ultimately the graduate tax. You only pay it back if you benefit from it. Everybody around this room, if you're thinking about going to university, you should look at your tuition fees as a risk-free loan. You only pay it back if you benefit from it. If you decide to do a degree that you love, on a subject that you feel passionate about, and you then decide to do something else after you leave, and you don't end up earning enough to pay back that loan, you don't pay it back and it gets written off. People should never be afraid to go to university and worry about that tuition fee loan. Now, the real problem is about maintenance grants, and the Liberal Democrat manifesto will bring back maintenance grants for people from more disadvantaged backgrounds to pay for your rent, your food, and your lifestyle. And exactly as Pippa says, people are having to work through universities, they're not spending enough time on their studies, and that's the real problem. The tuition fee issue has really been weaponised by the Labour Party, despite introducing them in the first place, to actually put people off from university when really it should be seen as an absolutely risk-free approach to your education.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I am fully aware of the fact that tuition fees are fairly high on account of the fact that I'm still paying mine off every month. What I would say, though, is behind the questions about tuition fees is a fundamental principle. The person who benefits most from the fact that I went to university and was fortunate enough to do that is myself. And I benefit because I've got a decent job and earn a decent wage. Now, if I wasn't paying for my own tuition fees, who would be? Well, if it was through general taxation, it would be working people on lower wages who never even had the chance to go to university. For me, that is fundamentally unfair. So I get where you're coming from. I know it's tough to swallow, trust me, because I'm still paying it off. But I think, in terms of fairness, tuition fees need to stay.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Tuition fees should stay, but in all honesty, it's just too high. It's incredibly high. I mean, it was the Conservative Party that raised it from 3,000 to, was it 3,000 to 9,000? Don't know why, but I can't see why it can't be at least 5,000, for goodness sake. How does a homeless person go to college or university? Very difficult. It's just too high. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, what a great question. Because we had, the last time the Liberal Democrats actually got into government, they spent the whole time campaigning to get rid of tuition fees. Got into government, what did they do? They immediately reversed that policy. The Labour Party, they campaigned at the last election to actually get rid of tuition fees, and then it turned out that it wasn't quite get rid of them, it was sort of get rid of them for people coming in the future, and that they would still exist for all the existing students like you. So those two parties you really can't trust. The Brexit Party, we've got a pragmatic solution to this. We understand that it's not possible to completely remove all of the tuition fees, but we do propose to remove the interest. And this means that you won't actually be paying any more, and if it takes some time before you finish off and are able to repay it, then you're not actually accumulating huge amounts of interest which you have to pay in addition to the tuition fees. So we believe that it's a pragmatic and sensible approach to this, and it is fully costed by extending the term of the loan. So it's beneficial to students, and it doesn't disadvantage other people as well. Thank you.
There's a lot of questions asked. Some of it you covered, the answers that you gave, but we had a very good diverse amount of questions, and well done to all of you for the questions that you asked.
So can I say, for those of you that had questions, could the panel be averse to them tweeting them to you or emailing?
Yes.
Yes, would that be okay? So, tweet them. Would it be a tweet or email?
Tweets are good because we can then kind of add our thoughts, but we can email as well. I'm happy to answer specifically.
It depends on whether people want it to be public or private interaction.
I think
So
email.
yeah.
We've got the students here, so we can ask them and then we can
Okay.
No worries. Right, so what we do now is we have our 3-minute closing that we can do, and we'll start with Jamie this time. We'll start Dennis then, so we'll start with Zane and come down. Okay?
So, once again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Fundamentally, 3.5 years ago, this country voted by 52% to 48%, 17.4 million votes, that we wanted to leave the European Union. This was democracy. All of the parties and all of the politicians at that point said, we're going to abide by this result, and whatever the result, we're going to implement it. We've had 3.5 years of all the politicians from all the political parties doing their absolute utmost to thwart the democratic wish of the people. Now I know that 52% is not a huge difference, but that's the same kind of result you get in a general election. You don't have a general election, get a party elected, and then say, well, I didn't really like the result, can we run it again, please? You get to implement the manifesto and the wishes of the people at that time. Let's get Brexit done, and if in 10, 15, 20 years people decide that they want to change their minds, okay, I very much doubt it. And the big fear of those people who are fighting their utmost to oppose Brexit is they know it's going to be successful. They know we are going to be better off being independent. They know that we're going to be able to do trade deals. They know we're going to be more prosperous. They know food prices are going to be dropping by 20%. They know that people want to come to this country from all over the world, and that we will have the best and the finest people here, and that we will be a great nation. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, and we will continue to thrive. And after Brexit, after we leave a declining European Union, where they are declining as a proportion of global trade. And once we open ourselves up to the world, back to the Commonwealth countries, to the United States, to China, to India, to all these places where we should be trading and where we should be able to do deals in our own right, we are going to be more prosperous. So I urge you, unlike the other parties, who all of them, in one form or another, are going to extend the pain for everybody, Lib Dems especially, Labour Party, Lord knows what they're going to do, and the Conservative Party are signing up to a new treaty and paying 39 billion. We're the one party that's going to get it done now. So vote for us. Thank you very much.
Brexit. We have to leave. We voted to leave. And I believe we will leave. Listen, regarding Brexit, what I'm saying is that we don't have to just rely on Europe telling us what to do. Yeah? What we have is we've got countries like Africa, like India and Pakistan, who can do trade deals. We've got the Commonwealth who can do trade deals with. We've got places like Brazil, like China, where we can do trade deals with. So there's many places where we can do trade deals with. We can't do it at the moment now because we're stuck. Yeah? Because why we can't do it is because Europe is still telling us what to do. They told Cameron what to do, they told Theresa May what to do, and they're telling Boris what to do as every time he goes over there. So I'm saying vote for Christian People's Alliance. We're saying leave, honour democracy. We're saying that we're the only party that stands for marriage as what God intends. We're the only party that stands for no to abortion, which is a Christian concept. We're the only party that wants to protect the unborn child. We're the only party that is saying no, to teaching gender identity within schools. We're the only party that's saying that. Nobody else is saying it. And yes, we want to fight crime because we see the importance of dealing with crime now for the next generation, for supporting young people so that they can move forward in life. We agree with putting more in education, we're supporting young people for moving them forward. So say yes to Christian People's Alliance because no matter what, we're here to stay. Thank you.
Well, I just want to talk briefly about why we're having this general election. The sad fact is our politics is stuck. Our parliament can't get anything through, it's stuck in a rut. And people are crying out for a decisive government that can finally move this country forward again. And as part of moving our country forward, we need to deal with Brexit. Of course we do. And it's only the Conservatives that can get Brexit over the line. And once we've got Brexit done, we can move on to other things. We can start investing billions more in our NHS. We can level up education funding. We can spend more on infrastructure using apprentices in order to work on those infrastructure projects. We can get 20,000 more police on the streets. We can raise the living wage to £10.50 an hour by 2025. And what's the alternative to this? Well, the alternative is a minority Labour government, probably propped up by the SNP and who knows who else, and led by Jeremy Corbyn. Now, unfortunately, Jeremy Corbyn's representative isn't here today, but Jeremy Corbyn is a man who has failed to stamp out disgusting racism in his own party, and indeed, he's encouraged it. He's a man who has always taken the side of our country's enemies rather than our allies. He's a man who wants to make this country's defences weaker by scrapping Trident. This is a man who would want to bankrupt our economy through taxes and debt and more spending. This is a man who wants to hold 2 more referendums, asking 2 questions that we've already had answers to, one on Scotland and one on the EU, and breaking our country apart in the process. This country deserves better than Jeremy Corbyn, this constituency deserves better than Jeremy Corbyn, and you deserve better than Jeremy Corbyn. So please consider moving this country forward and not back on December the 12th, and please consider voting Conservative. Thank you very much.
I think I'm going to be able to to measure the success of my speech by how much agreement I get from down the end there. So, I'd like to start off by this concept of getting Brexit done, because it's nonsense. Brexit, if the Conservatives are able to govern with a majority, is about getting Brexit started. We're going to be spending 10 years arguing over trade deals, having various Conservative ministers coming and telling us whether it's Brexity enough, what flavour of Brexit they want, whether we need to crash, whether we need to... That's going to be the reality. The only way to get Brexit done is to get it stopped. And then we can go on and talk about something else. Brexit is a disaster, a historic disaster that we still have time to stop. We can get on to fixing the climate emergency, which is absolutely the most vital thing that is facing us today as a species. We are in the, as various people tell us on the news almost every week, we are at the tipping point. And we need to rapidly decarbonise our economy. Otherwise, there's not going to be much left fighting for and left over about arguing about sovereignty or who is it that is telling us how much water we can drink or how polluted our skies are going to be. We need to get on with fixing the NHS and providing the funding it needs, and we need to get back to fixing our crumbling schools and providing enough funding for our teachers and for bursaries and support for students like you to learn the jobs that are going to help us to excel and to push the economy in a post-carbon and a much more technologically aware world. And I think that I am reassured that people like you are here, and I think that generally the reactions from the crowd were reassuring to various points as we went through. But I'd just encourage you, keep active in your communities, keep aware of what is going on around you, get involved in local groups, maybe not politics, but there are much more beneficial ways to contribute to your economy, to your communities. So I'd just like to say thank you all for coming, and hopefully I can persuade you, either this time or in the future, to give me or somebody up here at the Yellow Rosette your vote. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's been brilliant to engage with all of you today. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope that I've managed to answer your questions, that I've contributed to your understanding of the Green Party's stance on a variety of issues, and help you to decide what your political priorities are and how you might vote in the future. I thought that a rundown of some of our main ideas would be a fitting conclusion, so here goes. To begin with, we are the real deal when it comes to environmentalism. It is the heart of what we do. We've long called for urgent action to tackle climate change, the threat to many species, and the problem of managing the waste that we produce. And we see that more and more people are waking up to these issues. We have policies that face up to the challenges that lay ahead. We propose a Green New Deal, which will aim to decarbonise the UK by 2030, empowering communities to transition from high carbon to low or zero carbon, introducing stricter environmental regulations, and protecting and restoring natural habitats. Further to this, as I said earlier, we've always opposed austerity measures. We believe that everybody is entitled to good public services, and in particular that healthcare and education are the two main pillars of a fair and progressive society. So we will fund the NHS properly. We will return it, rather, to a wholly publicly funded and run and accountable service. And we also want to create a system of free care for those who are 65 or over, those people who want to continue living in their own homes but need some support to do so. We also, as we touched on earlier, want to have access, everybody to have access to a quality education no matter what their family background. So we oppose the privatisation and the commercialisation of our schools and our colleges and our universities. We want to restore funding, we want to return academies to local authority control, we want to get rid of tuition fees. We want to address the inequality that's endemic in the housing market, in the private rented sector, and in social housing as well. We want truly affordable homes for everyone, not just luxury flats which are being built left, right and centre for property speculators. We want rent controls, we want security of tenure. We don't want regenerations of estates without full consultation of residents and balloting. We want electoral reform. We don't like this first past the post system. How long can we continue lurching between the two big parties? We want proportional representation. We want an elected House of Lords, and we want votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. And lastly, we value cooperation with our European friends. We're a Remain party calling for a people's vote, a second referendum. The first one was only advisory. This one will be binding. We'll fight to retain environmental protections of workers' rights and employees' rights and freedom of movement and peace in Northern Ireland. And that's it.
I just want to say a huge thank you for giving up the time to come. I think the owner keeps his job safe and quite hard, that's for definite. I just want to thank all of you as well. You've given up your lunch break to come do this. You've asked great questions and you've shown great respect to everybody on the panel. So can you also say thank